So good evening, everyone. This is the final class in our Lojong series. It's the 16th in this series. So as usual, we are going to start with the opening recitation. You can just listen to the recitation and contemplate the meaning. But if you know the words, then of course you can join in as I say the opening recitation, as I recite these opening recitations. All mother sentient beings, limitless as the sky, especially those enemies who hate me, obstructors who harm me, and those who create obstacles on my path to liberation and all-knowingness. May they experience happiness and be separated from suffering. I will quickly establish them in the state of the most perfect and precious awakening. All mother sentient beings, limitless as the sky, especially those enemies who hate me, obstructors who harm me, and those who create obstacles on my path to liberation and all-knowingness. May they experience happiness and be separated from suffering. I will quickly establish them in the state of the most perfect and precious awakening. All mother sentient beings, limitless as the sky, especially those enemies who hate me, obstructors who harm me, and those who create obstacles on my path to liberation and all-knowingness. May they experience happiness and be separated from suffering. I will quickly establish them in the state of the most perfect and precious awakening. Thus, until I achieve awakening, I engage in virtuous deeds with body, speech, and mind. Until death, I engage in virtuous deeds with body, speech, and mind. From now until this time tomorrow, I engage in virtuous deeds with body, speech, and mind. In the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha most excellent, I take refuge until awakening is reached. By the merit of generosity and other perfections, may I attain Buddhahood for the sake of all migratory beings. In the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha most excellent, I take refuge until awakening is reached. By the merit of generosity and other perfections, may I attain Buddhahood for the sake of all migratory beings. In the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha most excellent, I take refuge until awakening is reached. By the merit of generosity and other perfections, may I attain Buddhahood for the sake of all migratory beings. May all mother sentient beings, limitless as the sky, have happiness and the causes of happiness. May they be liberated from suffering and the causes of suffering. May they never be separated from the happiness that is free from sorrow. May they rest in equanimity, free from attachment and aversion. May all mother sentient beings, limitless as the sky, have happiness and the causes of happiness. May they be liberated from suffering and the causes of suffering. May they never be separated from the happiness that is free from sorrow. May they rest in equanimity, free from attachment and aversion. May all mother sentient beings, limitless as the sky, have happiness and the causes of happiness. May they be liberated from suffering and the causes of suffering. May they never be separated from the happiness that is free from sorrow. May they rest in equanimity, free from attachment and aversion. Now remember that this text, Lojong, Mahayana Lojong, in 7 points, Of the 7 points, the main practice is explained and taught in the second point. As a foundation to the second point is the first point, which is what is known as the preliminaries or the foundations. If on the foundational level we are clear and we are stable, then everything else that we build on this foundation will be strong, will be durable, will be reliable. If on the foundational level, what we have is not strong, is half-hearted, is still weak, then to attempt to build and to even build something tall, something fancy, is not only a waste of effort, but potentially dangerous. So first, very important to train in the preliminaries. To reorientate our priorities, to reorientate our lives, to refine our intentions, to practice the Dharma in such a way that the Dharma that we practice goes in the direction of the way things are. Dharma with a capital D is just the way things are, rather than the way we imagine them to be, or the way we want them to be. So in training in the preliminaries, we are training and practicing, refining our intentions, gaining clear focus, and principally to make a resolve, beginning with making the resolve to turn our minds away from distractions, to turn our mind away from confusion. And to that end, there are the 4 considerations or the 4 contemplations that are known as the 4 contemplations that turn the mind away from confusion, to turn our mind away from the way it habitually goes, to reroute this network so that instead of the network that leads to confusion, we reroute this network so that we will travel along the path to freedom from confusion, to clarity. So first, consider the fact that although we now have this precious human existence with all the possibilities of practicing Dharma, of gaining freedom, while it is great reason to rejoice and to celebrate this fact, also know that this is not something that will come again so easily. And therefore, we have to take this opportunity that we have right now in order to reach that which is truly meaningful, which is to become free. Free from confusion, freedom from confusion and freedom from suffering, freedom from self-cherishing, so that we can enjoy the freedom to set others on the path to awakening, and not just ourselves. Also consider that the time of death is uncertain, but death itself is a certainty. Consider how everything is uncertain and subject to change. And therefore, we have no time to waste. Then consider that all of cyclic existence, all of confused existence necessarily entails dissatisfaction, frustration, and suffering. that within all these states of confusion, with their ups and downs, with their joys and sorrows, there is no meaningful happiness to be found. But if we want to be free from confusion and free from suffering and satisfaction, then consider that suffering originates in non-virtue and happiness originates in goodness. Resolve then to give up non-virtue and to practice the practices of goodness and virtue. That is the heart of the Buddha's teachings. Since our actions of body, speech, and mind create our reality of happiness and suffering, therefore, recognizing and knowing what to practice and what to abandon is of utmost importance. So these preliminaries of reorientating our lives, reorientating our goals, refining our intention is important to reflect on. Then with this reflection, we also engage in the preliminary of stabilizing the mind. So that this mind of ours, this heart of ours, which is that which decides whether we experience suffering or happiness, is this heart, is this mind. But when this heart or this mind, this heart mind is unruly, where we have no say whatsoever as to how it works, how it functions, then of course, it can only be confusion and suffering. And if we don't want confusion and suffering, then we have to work with this mind. We have to work with this heart mind. And the first step to working with this heart mind is to allow our heart mind to re-experience its own nature, to re-experience its own self-sufficiency, to re-experience how happiness and suffering arises from within mind, and therefore, if suffering is to cease, it has to cease within the mind. If happiness is to be experienced, it has to originate from the mind. And so the first step, we allow ourselves to train in the mind abiding, setting itself unto itself. So now let both your body and mind settle into their own places. Let them settle and find their own places of rest, of openness, of ease, of naturalness. Nothing to do, nothing to improve, nothing to prove. Simply let body and mind find their own places of rest and ease. Trust that when you get out of the way, both your body and mind can find their own places of rest and ease. And in that way, let your body and mind settle into their own places. Ultimately, let body and mind be present right here on this seat in this moment. And all you have to maintain is one moment of awareness, and the next moment of awareness, and the next moment of awareness. When you are ready, also you can rely on breath as it enters and leaves your body through your nostrils. Anchor your attention, sharpen your attention there. Or as breath arises and ceases from within your body. In the second case, your attention is more to the center of your body or even down to your belly, your stomach. As you inhale, experience your body expanding, your belly expanding. As you exhale, experience it contracting, expanding, contracting. And anchor your attention on the soothing and calming rhythm of breath. Count to 21. With each inhalation, exhalation, count 1 and 2 and 3. Make sure that your attention is on breath and not so much on counting. So if counting right now simply distracts you, then it's okay. For now, leave the counting, but stay with the breath. Inhale, exhale, inhale, exhale. As you let your mind and body settle, trust in this open spaciousness. Trust that this open spaciousness that you are able to experience is indeed the way things are. That even though everything appears vividly, clearly, solidly, In fact, the nature of all experiences is this openness, this spaciousness. Recognize that all experiences that we label as pleasant and unpleasant, experiences that we want to have more and those that we want to have less, recognize they are all ephemeral, temporarily arising, temporarily ceasing, arising, ceasing, arising, unstable, uncertain, but also free, dynamic, and nothing remains fixed. When you recognize this non-fixity, it is also recognizing the inherent freedom that is possible for all our experiences. Where all appearances can be experienced, like a rainbow, like a movie, like a dream, still vivid, still clear. But you do not need to be dragged around by your emotions. You do not need to be stuck in suffering and unhappiness. Because the nature of all experiences is without essence. Without essence here means you do not need to be stuck. You can be free. And if you can trust this nature, if you can recognize this, just relax in that. Experience this spaciousness. Experience the nature of all things, which is also the nature of your own mind, which is also the nature of all the experiences that arise from moment to moment. And rest in this spaciousness. This, in essence, is the cultivation of the experience of absolute bodhicitta, the first part of the main training of Lojong. Give yourself time to experience this, to cultivate this experience. Experience that can slowly lead to realizations. Realizations that can then be stabilized and enhanced. This is thus the wisdom aspect or the emptiness aspect of our training. Then whenever you are ready, train in relative bodhicitta by recalling all the kindness that you have experienced yourself, and therefore in remembering all the kindnesses that you have experienced in your life, you naturally radiate kindness towards all others. If it is easier, you can radiate that kindness first to those who are close to you that you are fond of, but eventually let this kindness radiate in all directions. But first, recognize, remember, recall how you have been the object of others' kindness. From the people who gave birth to you, who raised you, to just a random stranger smiling at you, holding a door for you, letting you go first. Simple acts of kindness. To the kindness of our teachers, our guide, our spiritual guide, just recall all those kindness and feel yourself basking in that kindness, which then ignites your own inherent ability to be kind and to be loving. And then at that point, radiate kindness, radiate love in all directions. wishing all beings everywhere happiness, and wishing that they also learn through their own experience how to cultivate causes for happiness. Do this without departing from absolute bodhicitta, which is always spacious, always open, never tight, never stuck, always dynamic. And like a great ocean, that anything can come in without it being disturbed. As you experience and radiate love and kindness, that can then naturally lead to feelings of compassion, which is a deeper kind of love in a sense. Because at this deeper level, you become even ready to substitute yourself whenever you see suffering anywhere. But this willingness to substitute yourself for whatever suffering you see anywhere being experienced by anyone can only really arise when we learn how to accept our own suffering, our own unhappiness. To accept is to make space for it, not to judge it, but to make space for it. To say it's okay. It's okay because of absolute bodhicitta. It's okay because even this suffering is temporary, has no essence, just arising due to causes and conditions, and therefore we know it will cease due to causes and conditions dispersing, very fragile or very dynamic. So first, give lots of space to our own unhappiness, to our own suffering. Because the irony of being free of this suffering is to give it a lot of space. And as we develop this, which you could call self-compassion, then the capacity to practice compassion towards others can grow quite naturally. And in this way, relative bodhicitta, which is the practice of love and compassion, becomes seamless. And finally, to take it full circle, back to the beginnings of this meditation, where you are anchoring your attention on breath. Breathe in, breathe out. Now, since breath is an essential element, the essential element for being alive, we have to breathe anyway. Now, mount your practice of love and compassion upon breath in a natural way, in a seamless way, so that when we breathe in with compassion, our own suffering and the suffering of others. When we breathe out with love and kindness, remembering the love and kindness we experience, others showing us, radiating to us. And once we remember that, we ourselves are radiating that towards others. Breathe in with compassion towards suffering. Breathe out with the wish of happiness to self and other. Breathe in, breathe out. Breathe in, breathe out. Ground yourself in the groundlessness of absolute bodhicitta as you practice this relative bodhicitta technique of Tonglen, to give and to give with love and kindness, to take with compassion and courage. So let's take a very short break, about 5 minutes, and then we will start again. So we are back. I think Fabiola, you're the host, yeah? Okay, good. So this is our final class for this Lojong series. When I started this series, I had no idea, how long this is going to go. But here we are, 16th class, which means, gosh, 16th class? That means 4 months. How's your retreat going? Yeah, I'm sure nobody 5 years ago said, oh, 5 years from now, I'm going to enter into a 4-month retreat. I'm going to crawl into my cave and go into retreat mode for 4 months. So Buddha was right, nothing is certain. Everything is uncertain, I think we use the word like impermanence a lot, yeah. But sometimes the word impermanence is such a big word, I mean, literally, right? The spelling, impermanence, And sometimes we miss like what it is about, But the experience of impermanence is uncertain. It's uncertain. So that means what we habitually label as pleasure, uncertain. What we habitually label as pain, uncertain. What we habitually label as desirable, uncertain. What we habitually label as desirable, also uncertain. Even what we label as uncertain is also uncertain. So everything is just uncertain. If we want to kind of qualify uncertainty a little, especially when things are not going our way, then we might call it unreliable. Yeah? But a more neutral term. So when it's not going our way, we experience this impermanence or this uncertainty as unreliable. When it's going our way, then we might label it as dynamic. Ooh. But a neutral word, I think, is just uncertain. Yeah. So if we take to heart this very simple, it's a very simple point, but very profound point. If we take to heart, that the Buddha said, everything is uncertain, then we become more free. Yeah, we become more free. Yes, there's predictions, yes, and predictions and reality of, in many ways, of course, there's a lot of suffering that has arisen in the context of this COVID-19. I'm not denying that. And then, predictions, dire predictions of what might be coming next in terms of the economy. But don't forget Buddha said, it's uncertain. It's uncertain. Then when suffering actually turns up for you, even then, it is still uncertain, meaning you can do something about it, you can change it. Not so easily, of course, but in part not so easily because cognitively you might want to change it. Emotive level, you're not going to do anything about it. And that's not called changing, you know, that's not changing mind. Lojong, one translation for Lojong is changing mind, right? A lot of times we're not changing mind. We're just throwing tantrums. And spiritually, we're just like that child, you know. It's like we just stomp our feet and throwing a tantrum when things are not going our way. And you feel so annoyed. You don't like that, you know. And you say, I don't want this. I won't want this. I don't want this. But, you know, you're exercising the, you know, stomping. But you say, I don't want this. I don't want this. I don't want this, you know. So even intellectually, we say, you know, I want to change this. I don't like this. But heart level, oh, we are so wedded to that, you know. So in one of the Lojong commitments, Samaya, it says, you know, don't be so predictable. In that context, it's saying, you know, sometimes it's translated as don't be so loyal. So loyal to what? So loyal to your stubbornness. So loyal to your suffering. So predictable in behaving, you know, like a child throwing tantrum in the face of things not going our way. If that can actually fix anything, yes, go ahead, throw more tantrums. But that's it's never fixed anything, you know. Yeah, so 16 weeks. It's good to, you know, kind of put a closure to this series. Perhaps if you're inspired or need a boost, you can always watch, you know, this series. It's in the YouTube channel, Drigong Dharmakirti Circle, Drigong Dharmakirti, and the first class of this series is also downloaded now into that playlist on the YouTube channel. Yeah, so all 16 is there. Yeah. So any questions or comments about the meditation that we did before our break? Observations to share?
I have a question that's exactly related to the meditation specifically, but
sure.
I wonder if you could say more about how guilt is self-grasping. Is it because guilt is associated with a particular view of the self, its attachment to a particular view of the self? Is that how it's self-grasping?
Why does it matter that it's self-grasping?
Oh, it's part of my you know, religious baggage that I drag around.
Right. So okay, so the main thing is basically it's like, what should we do with guilt? Yes.
Yes. What shall we do with guilt?
Yeah,
Thank you. Yes.
Right. So don't worry about whether it's self-grasping or not. You know, that may or may not be convincing. I could come up with something. Yeah. But really, the question of what do we do with guilt? You know, so like any experience that we have, in the Lojong tradition. So using the Lojong tradition and the basic, you know, kind of basic in the sense of fundamental teachings of the Buddha, it says, lean into it. First, lean into it. So what does that mean? That means don't run away from it. Don't ignore it. Don't run away from it. Don't let it run your life, but lean into it. So that means experience it with awareness, with focus. So when you lean into that guilt, when you experience it with presence of mind, you will begin to see more clearly, or you could say experience more clearly, how heavy it is. And then stay with it, and stay with it, and stay with it, and you will see that it's really heavy, that it's really burdensome. And when you begin to see how heavy and how burdensome it is, you will let it go. Yeah? You will let it go. And in fact, I'm even afraid that, if you think, oh, guilt is self-grasping, that equation, yeah? Guilt is self-grasping, which, yes, I can give you reasonings as to why guilt is self-grasping. But here I'm afraid that equation might actually be feeding your guilt. Oh, guilt is self-grasping. Self-grasping is bad, bad, bad. Oh, I have guilt. So I am with self-grasping. So I must be bad, bad, bad. I feel guilty for having self-grasping. Then we're stuck with it again, So lean into, experience this guilt with awareness. Not like in a therapy way of like working through the guilt. I'm not talking about that. And that might be helpful in the context of therapy. But in the context of meditation or training the mind or Lojong, it's not talking about rehearsing, the narrative, or unpacking the narrative, or finding, right, all the nooks and crannies of this, guilt English muffin, right, with lots of holes here, there, everywhere, right? No, not doing that, but rather lean in with awareness to see how heavy it is. Feel its weight. So in other words, what you're doing is you can see how weighty and how burdensome, and therefore how unnecessary, and therefore how tiresome it is to carry it around. Then drop it. And then when you drop it, likewise, when you drop it with awareness, with attention, because in that moment when you drop it, you can also experience, oh my God, this is so light. Yeah, you taste that lightness. Ah, what a relief. Now maybe next week, you pick it up again. Because it's habit, So it's not a one-time thing. But at least next week when you pick it up again, you will remember, if I would just quit picking it up and drop it, it can be so light. And in that way, give it space when you're leaning into it. So absolute bodhicitta is the space that you need to give to something like guilt or resentment. These are very hard to let go because they're very addictive. Resentment and guilt. They're harder than, other things.
I have a comment about guilt.
Yes.
I have a comment about guilt.
Mm-hmm.
Our practice for things that we've really done that we should feel bad about,
Yes.
or that we should regret.
Yes.
There are plenty of opportunities in the practice to admit it to ourselves.
Yes.
And to confess.
Yes.
And as far as what is left over, if we have habits of guilt, to me, it's very simple. The teaching is just put down poisonous food.
Yes. Yeah, so there's an aspect related to the guilt. I'm glad Larry bringing some balance to this. There's an aspect to the guilt which has to do with, indeed, yes, unskillful ways of acting that has brought about suffering. That should be recognized. But it's the residual stuff, right? And the residual stuff, yeah, this is excellent. Applying one of the commitments there, don't eat poisonous food.
I have many things in my life that I've regretted doing.
Mm-hmm.
And the practice has helped me bring that to the surface and confess it.
Mm-hmm.
And take responsibility for it.
Yeah.
But after that, you've confessed. You've decided not to do it anymore, not to repeat the same mistakes. So there's nothing to carry around anymore. You've done what you can do.
Yeah. So those of us who have a more formal practice in Tibetan Buddhism, we do our Vajrasattva mantras, Some of you, maybe, I don't know, like 20 Hail Marys, 7 Our Fathers. Does that help, Kathy?
Yes, very much. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Be careful, yeah? Don't feed that guilt.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then the point with self-grasping, just a quick reminder. Atisha says, in this particular, he said he received Lojong or Bodhicitta instruction from 3 very amazing teachers. 3 amazing teachers. 3 very amazing teachers. And the most amazing one is the one that he met in Indonesia, that he traveled from India to go study with, and it said he studied with him for 12 years. And he said that teacher begins from the place of self-grasping and say, don't embarrass self-grasping. and for sure, don't shame self-grasping. But work with self-grasping. So then what that means is, well, if self is what you are most concerned about, let's figure out how to be skillful in being good to ourselves. So then self-grasping need not be a problem if we develop the skill to be truly good to the self. Sometimes in some teachings it says, self-grasping is the real enemy. So sometimes it's helpful to hear that. But other times also helpful to remember, Atisha said, of the 3 teachers that taught him Bodhicitta, the one that taught him to accept his own self-grasping and to work with his self-grasping without judgment, with space, with care, with compassion. So you need to have compassion. One of the Lojong, in the second point, right? The main second point in the 10th statement, it says, you do it in this order, the taking and the giving and the taking. You do it with, you begin by taking your own suffering. So that means, your own quote unquote suffering, your own inadequacies, whatever inadequacies that you think you have or actually don't have, right? Inadequacy or not enough, whatever about yourself you feel not enough. I'm not loving enough. I'm not patient enough. I'm not good enough. You know, all the good stuff that you don't have enough. It says, have compassion to that wounded self that have been told you're not good enough, right? You're not smart enough, you're not kind. Now it's, you know, no longer you're not beautiful enough, you're not shapely enough, you're not, you know, strong enough. Now it's like, you know, these voices that say you're not kind enough, you're not generous enough, you're not spiritual enough. With skillfully working with this, you say, sure, all of you, come. All the different versions of you that is inadequate, that is not good enough. Now, okay, you all can come home. I have a place for you. Don't reject any of it.
I'd like to comment about that
Yes.
as well. Working with those issues is very different in a therapy type situation.
Yes.
And when I think you first brought up the idea that you start with yourself and direct all of this compassion toward yourself,
Yes.
it totally changes the atmosphere. Or it does for me. I mean, it's, you know, having compassion for the whole world is very difficult for me. I mean, I can intellectually get that, but once you sort of felt that compassion from yourself, not from somebody else, but from yourself to yourself,
yes,
it puts you in a whole different place.
Yes, absolutely.
Of being able to see in people you don't know, I think.
Right.
I mean, I can't really explain that phenomenon, but it's different. I mean, I've started out this without starting with that. And it's much more meaningful somehow when I try to broaden the giving
Yes.
to others.
Yes. Thank you.
Dr. Lai, I have a question about
Yes.
some of your opening comments after the meditation. You were talking about uncertainty, and I'm afraid I don't remember exactly the words, so I may misspeak, misparaphrase. But it was something about, I think it was something to the point of, if you accept the uncertainty, or something to that effect, so somehow in a way that kind of liberates it. I'm completely paraphrasing what you said, and so I may not be doing it correctly. But I remember the question that came into my mind is, I feel like uncertainty for me produces anxiety. And so,
of course,
you know, and I get the part of kind of, you know, when you watch things, they self-liberate, like you watch the thoughts, they'll self-liberate. And I get that with uncertainty, but like I say, it's hard for me to kind of embrace uncertainty, because for me that's anxiety producing. I just wondered if you could expand on that point a little bit, maybe.
Oh, sure. You know, not just for you, you know, habitually all of us. But here again, you know, lean into it. So you say, okay, uncertainty produces anxiety. Where exactly does that anxiety come from?
For me, I believe it's really the fear of suffering. You know, with the uncertainty, it could go good, it could go bad. If it goes good, no problem. You know, you're happy and all that. But also, it goes bad, you know, not so much. And I think it's the suffering the possible suffering that
So
comes
it's not uncertainty that is the problem.
fear.
And more specifically, fear of
Suffering.
not being in control,
True.
right?
True.
And control is based on the idea of a single cause.
Trying to escape suffering.
No, control is based on the idea that things happen due to a single cause. I know this sounds abstract, but it's not as abstract as it sounds. When we try to control anything, it's really based on the idea that if only I am the single cause that can control it, then everything will be fine. And to say that, I'm able to control something, is to say ultimately, from the Buddhist perspective and the Buddha's perspective, is to say that I have power over it. Sometimes Buddhist teaching seems to suggest that, but that's just a preliminary position. The preliminary position is you can change it, you can control it, you can blah, blah, blah. But the irony of how that happens is to actually see how, no, it's not possible. No, it's not possible. And because it's not possible, and if you try to do the impossible, you will only exhaust yourself. You will only frustrate yourself. You will only make yourself even more unhappy. You will only become more anxious. Where does the anxiety come from? Actually, where I was pointing at is the anxiety comes from wanting to control. And that's why it's such a vicious, and that's why it's called samsara, as in the round, literally. In Tibetan, samsara is translated as korwa. Korwa is the circle, because it's a vicious circle. Because of a feeling of not being in control, it leads to anxiety. As you feel the anxiety stronger, you want to control even more. And because between the desire to control and the satisfaction of that desire, the gap that is present and opens up bigger and bigger and bigger is proportionate to how much control you want. It's what opens the gap even further and further and further and further. Then, and the gap between your desire and its disappearance is what suffering is, So there's no other way except to reduce this desire to control. Then it gets closer. Then it gets closer. Then it gets closer, 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 closer. One senior American meditation teacher, Shinzen Young, I think one of his equations to kind of to explain suffering is, he says, suffering is pain, which in this equation, he says pain is natural. But suffering, dukkha, he says, is pain multiplied by resistance. Resistance is another word for, needing to be in control. So he says, the bad news is pain is not negotiable. Especially like physical pain, he says, that's just, the body is like, yeah. In fact, it's a pretty serious condition if your body, there are people with conditions like that they cannot feel pain, and you endanger your life when that particular inability to feel pain. So in that sense, bodily like pain, non-negotiable. That's the bad news, if it is bad news at all. But good news is resistance can be reduced to 0. And if resistance is 0 and pain is even 100 points, 200 points, 1,000 points, suffering is 0. Yeah?
So are you saying then, and maybe you're not, that to help to close that gap and to let go of the resistance, that one has to be able to accept the suffering?
Yes, lean into it, accept the suffering. Accept the suffering as in, not like, feed the suffering, but give it space and say it's okay, And so that is when all the other teachings that we have, and so I know a little bit about your background. So all the other teachings that we have, about karma, purification of karma ripening, that helps, in understanding. If the suffering has to come, then it's the ripening of past negative karma. My trying to control this is just going to delay that suffering. It's going to come another way. Better not. So let it just ripen here when I can deal with it. So you have to develop also trust in karma, trust in courage, and build courage by trusting karma is unmistaken. Then teachings like Lojong tells us, then when negative karma, no choice has to ripen, right? Then it's also a time to develop courage. And it's also a time to develop compassion for yourself. No judgment, but that's the meaning of compassion for yourself. No judgment. Oh, I failed again. Oh, I'm terrible. I did this wrong. No judgment. Take the suffering. Then develop further courage. Now that I'm suffering, may no one else has to suffer like this. That's the meaning of taking others' suffering. Not literally, like say, a car is going to run someone over, that you can literally be the one that gets run over. It means developing the courage and say, now that I'm suffering, let everyone's suffering ends with me here. Develop that. So then suddenly, right, the kind of suffering that has to arise because, we have not been able to purify them, they're no longer just, mindless suffering. Now they are meaningful suffering. So that's why in the teachings of like Vajrasattva and purification practice, it says the only virtue of suffering and negative karma is that they can be purified. Otherwise, there's nothing worth celebrating about negative karma or, suffering. Except that they can be purified. Yeah, so when we pull all these teachings, all the, points together, it becomes very powerful, the practice. It's up to us to make it powerful. Yeah, so now let us look at the rest of the precepts. I did say, we try to go through at least quickly. There are a lot of very good commentaries, So many books exist for this text. My contribution to this is to emphasize, in my kind of obviously biased opinion, two things. One, imploring you to look at the structure of this text and to not treat this as not divided into 7 points. Pay attention to the points where they belong. Then you know how to use the tools that are provided. That's one thing. I dare say. I've not seen it so far, any of the books addressing this point. Second point that I hope I've been able to communicate, it's a more organic, a more naturalistic practice of the second point, rather than very technique oriented, a much more kind of natural way of practicing what is taught in point number 2. So these are the two things. Then the rest, so many books, traditional commentaries, modern commentaries, they're very helpful. But nonetheless, for the sake of completion, we should go over the rest of these lines. So the next line is, train in all areas impartially. It is vital that this be deep and all-pervasive. So train in all areas impartially. Here, areas are referring both to all areas of our experience. That's one sense area, right? So initially, you might want to train in those areas that you feel more confident. In those areas of your experience that you have a better hold on. But don't limit it to there, because you also want to take this to those places that are a little sore, a little hard to right now. But here it's reminding us, we have to train in all areas impartially. All areas impartially is also talking about towards the things that we like, the people that we like, as well as towards the things and the people that we don't like. Our Lojong practice should be impartial. Then it should be deep. Go deep and go pervasive. Deep is referring to wisdom. Pervasive is referring to love and compassion. All-encompassing love and compassion, and deeply grounded in the wisdom aspect. So back to the question on anxiety, on guilt. The reason why we can develop compassion, translation, give space in our own experience for those things that obviously, it's not very pleasant. Yeah, of course. But if we give space to it, why can we give space to them? How can we give space to them? With absolute bodhicitta, basically telling us, of course there is space. It is all space. In fact, it's space. Turning up in a shape, in a form, in a particular quality, particular texture, that then we label guilt, that then we label anxiety. Just let that space be spacious. Always meditate on those that have been set apart. What is this setting apart, right? Here, those who have been set apart is referring to those that we find it hardest to develop love and compassion for. Right now, lots of candidates. No matter what your politics is, no matter, what your spirituality is, right now, I can say those who have been set apart, plenty of candidates for you to train with regards to them. And that they will be your special focus for meditation. And so our opening recitation, all mother sentient beings, limitless as space, especially those enemies who hate me, or those enemies that I hate, obstructors that harm me, and those who create obstacles to my path of awakening, particularly towards you. I pray for your happiness, for your freedom from suffering, and for your complete enlightenment. Those are the ones that have been set apart. Yeah. And among those that have been set apart, linking it back to what we were talking about earlier, they are part of you. There's nothing that triggers me more than the things that I cannot accept about myself, seeing it in someone else. I don't know about you. I can tell you about me. That's how I am. And you so don't want to see it, so you become so annoyed. Then you lash out at that person. So it again comes back to this point, this Lojong point. The relative practice of relative bodhicitta, the main practice. So the 10th line there, as for the sequence of taking, start with yourself. Now, that's such an important line. That's such an important line. Start with yourself. Develop the capacity to take your suffering. In other words, to give space to your suffering, to give space to your inadequacies, to give space to what you don't like about yourself. Don't be dependent on external conditions. Throughout this text, there is actually quite a number of advice given to how we should try to surround ourselves with ideal conditions for our practice. But at the same time, it also teaches how we should not become dependent on them. In fact, when suffering arises, that is the time where we take them all onto the path. So here, more specifically, it's saying, don't be so tethered to food, clothing, protection from illness, protection from bad luck, protection from evil spirits, and so on and so forth. This is not saying, between the two, it's better to suffer than not to suffer. It's not saying that. It's just saying, don't be dragged around by good conditions. Our practice is so that rain or shine, we are prepared. We're good. The natural cycle of nature is that some days it has to rain and some days it has to shine. That's just how the way things are. You don't like it? Well, throw a tantrum. And then what happens? Suffer. Suffer. And I have to admit, sometimes with some people, you think, I think that's how they become happy, when they're complaining and suffering. But no, it only looks like this, and it's only because, they cannot see it in other ways, and that's really, really sad. Yeah. And so and then when we see that, don't become annoyed. If you become annoyed, or if you become judgmental, that means that actually, when you see that, immediately you can treat that as a mirror. It's like, okay, I think there's something going on in here about that, whatever you're seeing. So don't be so dependent on external conditions, so that you always practice the two bodhicittas, rain or shine. Then the next statement, now practice the main points. Right? Now practice the main point. What does that mean? Right? That now is talking about don't postpone. If things are going well, right? Going well, and then something not well comes. You're like, I don't want to deal with it. That's called later. It says, no, now. Now is the time to practice, not later. So when is now? When's now? Now. Main point here is talking about the two bodhicittas. Now. In another class, we were looking at how it says that the crucial, the way you can say the difference between whether you are practicing the great way, the Mahayana, or not, lies in how intentionally you are framing your actions in terms of bodhicitta. So what it's saying there is, superficially or not superficially, conventionally people say it's good to be loving, generous, all that naturally, that you don't even think about it. Actually, here it says, no, you should think about it. You should think about it in the sense of, you should always work on framing your actions in terms of bodhicitta. Even when you're not able to do what you feel your practice of bodhicitta would logically have you do, even when you're not able to do it, even with that, then give rise to regret in relation to how I'm not able to be consistent with my resolve to practice bodhicitta here. That is a good kind of guilt or regret. Maybe you don't like the word guilt. Let's call it regret. But that's regret with awareness. The problem is not regret. The problem is regret without awareness that leads to guilt. But regret with awareness becomes a way to purify, to change. So awareness, introspection is the other side of this coin. We talk a lot about mindfulness these days, but introspection is the other side of this coin. To introspect. That's also very important. So now is the time to practice. Don't misconstrue or don't misunderstand. Don't misconstrue or don't misunderstand. So here in the commentary, it gives a list. I'm going to read to you. It says there are 6 forms of misconstruing or misunderstanding. Avoid these. One, it's called misplaced patience. And what is this misplaced patience? It is misplaced patience when we are willing and able to bear the difficulties related to outdoing our enemies and protecting our friends. In other words, outdoing meaning like bringing suffering to our enemies, especially bringing suffering to our enemies as in our mind an act of kindness to our friends. It says it's misguided patience when you are so patient, no matter how difficult, I'm going to do this. The reverse or the opposite, any kind of suffering related to Dharma practice, that's not natural. I don't want to do that. Like for example, some practice, certain intensive retreat, you only sleep a few hours a night, and you wake up at different hours, to do your practice. That's not natural. But plotting and planning, to get rid of your enemies and to benefit your cronies, no matter how difficult, we have patience for that. It says that misplaced patience. Then 2, misplaced intention, which is when it comes to Dharma, it's okay. Another day. But when it comes to pursuing glory and riches, right now is the time. Misplaced intentions, misplaced relish, which is not finding enjoyment in Dharma, but whatever worldly pleasure that comes along, I'm going with that. Misplaced compassion is to be very indulgent of those who create suffering. But when you see someone working very hard for the Dharma, you think, why work so hard? And no compassion for them. That's misplaced compassion. Then misplaced pursuit. Here it says, not just yourself, but you encourage the people around you to pursue the 8 worldly concerns. But not a word to them about pursuing real happiness. This is not saying you need to go proselytize your family, so that no one will come to your Thanksgiving anymore, No, it's not saying that. It's not saying, you need to convert them to Buddhism. But, you should be concerned about, and find skillful ways, not to turn them into Buddhists, no, but to, when it's appropriate, to share and say, these things cause suffering. These things cause happiness. Particularly the 8 worldly concerns, If we become yanked by them, then they are the pushing and pulling, then we will never be free. Finally, misplaced joy, which is failure to cultivate joy for happiness and the virtues of samsara and nirvana. There are virtues even in samsara, and failure to cultivate joy for that. But instead, we feel joy when our rivals are suffering. Things don't go well for your competitor. You're like, ooh, yeah, it's a good day. So these are the 6 misconstruing, misplaced kind of energy. Don't vacillate. So be reliable. Don't vacillate. Be reliable. And this, is important, especially for Dharma practice. Sometimes we get very hot, very excited, very determined. Then when I see that a lot, actually. I see that a lot. But then what to say, right? Except to just say, be on the watch out, be on the lookout for that. I see a lot of people getting very excited and wanting to do this practice, that practice, this practice, that practice, but don't last, So sometimes, they say teachers should pray that they don't end up wasting their time. Wasting their time in not knowing, when this is all just going to be lots of false starts. This is not, saying don't be compassionate. Yeah, you still need to be compassionate even in situations like that. But knowing, when not to kind of expect so much, it's a blessing. But ourselves as students, it's important to appreciate this point about be consistent. This consistent, I mean, if it's just the first few years that you're not consistent, that is normal, not consistent. But the problem these days is also there's so many options available. The whole of, life has become a big buffet. So many choices. The reason why these super buffets can actually make money is because in the end, people don't actually get the satisfaction that they're looking for. Therefore, they keep coming back. And they will never find the satisfaction they're looking for. So they'll keep coming back. So the business continues. This is the story of samsara. And even the methods to escape samsara, has become a big buffet. And if we're not consistent, we will not be nourished. So this is this point here. Train wholeheartedly. Here I will say it's training with refining your intentions wholeheartedly. Refine our intentions. Right now, our intention is very mixed, mine included, you know. So we keep working on refining our intentions. Sincerity, developing sincerity, wholeheartedly in that sense, sincerity. Find freedom through discernment and analysis. This is an advice about applying reasoning. No matter how messy some situation, messy in the sense of like emotionally, you know, you can find freedom. Right? You can find space, in other words, if you're able to apply discernment and analysis. Now, when we are doing in the second point, the formal meditation, then we don't use so much analysis and thinking through. But this is precepts that we apply in our day-to-day lives to support our Lojong practice. Our main practice is to use reasoning, to kind of step back in all situations. When it gets heated, when it gets tight, when it gets sticky, step back. Use discernment, use analysis to find freedom. Don't make a big deal. Oh, that's really good. Always, you know, when things don't go our way, it's like the end of the world. And so with that regards, you know, how many times has the world ended, you know, only to start again the next day? We make a big deal. So here it says, don't make a big deal. And this don't make a big deal is also don't be boastful. Don't be kind of don't go announce to the world, you know, specifically with Lojong, I'm now practicing Lojong. It says you're inviting trouble, you know, if you do that. Then the guardians, the spiritual guardians of Lojong might come and test you, they say. Sometimes it's expressed like that. So don't make a big show out of your Lojong practice. Keep it private. Yeah. So that's also in the commentary, it says, don't make a big deal. It's also don't make a big deal of your Lojong practice, of your Dharma practice. Don't, the next one, don't be bound by irritation. Very simple words, you know. Very simple words. I will read you this one commentary. It says, do not retaliate even if others humiliate you in front of many people, and do not be annoyed. Here, you know, it's not saying like in a victimized way, out of fear, you do not retaliate and you do not become annoyed. But it is from a position of courage and strength, so that you see the foolishness of retaliating. So you don't, from that position, you don't. And you're saying, no, this person is suffering. That's why they just did what they did to me. Don't retaliate. And don't be annoyed, because why? When you are annoyed, who is suffering? It's as simple as that. Right? There's nothing altruistic about this, really. You know, a lot of the Lojong things, you know, we say Lojong is practicing altruism, right? But before you get to that altruism business, because sometimes that can become very distracting, you can easily just return back to, wait, do I get anything out of being annoyed? No. Do I get anything out of being jealous? No. Anything good? No. It's just suffering, you know. Just be done with it. So then it says, if we practitioners do not make the Dharma an antidote to self-grasping, our patience can become more fragile than a baby's skin. And we can feel even more irritable than the demons. Sometimes that happens, you know, because we have become more spiritually evolved. Then we get very irritated by idiots. Spiritual idiots, you know. You might not use that word, but trust me, you know, it's somewhere in there, you know. You're like, oh God, these idiots. So it says, you know, if you don't apply patience, you know, especially Dharma practitioners, you know, then you will be more fragile than baby skin. Easily get harmed by irritation because other people are so stupid. In your judgment, you know, are so foolish, are so unenlightened, then suffering. Yeah. Then don't be ill-tempered or be temperamental. That's easy, you know, and especially at certain points, you know, this will happen at certain points in your Dharma practice deepening. Yeah, like as the antidote goes deeper, right, to seek out, in Tibetan medicine, they talk about certain types of, like in Tibetan medicine, yeah, especially when it's a serious, like chronic disease, right? When you first go see the doctor, they will give you a prescription that will make you feel worse. Yes. You're like, what? I go to the doctor because I don't want to feel bad. Yeah, that's like the Western approach, you know. You go to the doctor so that they can, you know. But in the Tibetan and the Chinese and the Indian system, right, especially if it is chronic, first the prescription is going to make you feel worse. Why? According to this approach, it says the prescription that is initially given is given to go dig out all the problems because it's now hidden. So it needs to be brought up to the surface. So at that point, when it is bringing up to the surface, it's very uncomfortable. So especially during that, when you find that you're getting very temperamental, recognize that, you know, I mean, if in the context of your intensifying your Dharma practice, but somehow you find yourself getting temperamental, it is actually bringing up the initial prescription that you are being given by this Dharma doctor. It is bringing up things to the surface. Then the next set of, you know, medicine given, prescription given, will begin to remove one by one all these different aspects of this ailment. So Dharma practice, you know, is not just, in fact, it is not at all about feeling good. It's actually about changing, transforming suffering, removing suffering. And that does entail things not so comfortable at different points. So during those times, be careful. Don't be irritable. Don't be temperamental. And recognize what's going on. And again, be patient. Have compassion for your annoyance. It's not saying feed it, but it's saying give it space. Then, as a practical advice, don't be around people, when it's very strong, when you're feeling irritable, temperamental, go away, so that you don't harm others. That earlier point about, your training should be impartial. In one of the commentaries, it also points out that says, meaning what that means is, not only should you not lose your patience with sentient beings, you should also not lose your patience with insentient situations. In other words, don't even have like negative emotions towards insentient things. Anger towards, your vehicle that won't start, it's still anger. There's no being that is being harmed. If it's as opposed to like, being angry at your neighbor, then it's, actually harming someone. But even with your vehicle, don't, because it harms you. So that point I just remembered. Then don't expect rewards. There, more specifically, it's talking about don't in one translation I've seen, it says don't wait for applause. Don't seek acknowledgement. This is especially for people who are involved in nonprofits, in Buddhist temples, in church or whatever, When you serve, You don't wait for applause. Then more so when you're doing your own training, You want feedback from the teacher, but don't, fish for compliments. Because that's not what, you're wasting your time, That's not what's going to help you. These are all the precepts. These are all the guidelines for Lojong. Yeah. And it says, this quintessential elixir of instructions, which transmutes the 5 degenerations into the path of awakening, was transmitted by the sage of Suvarnadvipa. Today's, this area in Southeast Asia, where the Indonesian islands, Malaysia, all this whole area is Suvarnadvipa. More specifically, we think it's the island of Sumatra in modern day Indonesia. This is where his teacher taught him these instructions. Having been roused by the karma of past training and feeling intense inspiration, I ignore suffering and censure and sought out these instructions for taming ego fixation. Even if I die, I shall have no regrets. Geshe Chekawa wrote this. He says he sought out these instructions from the teachers who received them from Atisha, who received them from the sage of Suvarnadvipa. Yeah. So with this, we superficially went over this text. Comments, questions? Discussion.
My only comment is thank you so much.
Oh.
So, thank you so much for all these teachings in this 16 weeks. I think just
I have to remind myself, you know, don't expect an applause. Don't fish for compliments, you know.
just what you said last week about control and desire and control has stayed there, and there's so much more deepening that can happen. But I've been seeing how this lack of control or feeling I'm not in control really promotes a certain thing that I'm now learning to observe with more.
Yeah, lean into that. Yes, you know,
Yes.
my words only offer some prompts, right? You need to work on it. Anyone else, you know, the issue of like control, desire, satisfaction, or satisfying the desire, the gap is between, and how the satisfaction grows as the gap becomes bigger and bigger and bigger. Yeah. So the desire to quench my thirst and the ability to meet that desire, there's practically no gap right now, this one. So no frustration, no suffering arises. So in that sense, Buddha is not concerned about this kind of desire, where its satisfaction is immediate, no gap. Of course, if I habituate this, then I expect everything else to be like this. Then of course it becomes a problem. But generally, it's the type of desire where there's a gap. Then lean into that, look into that. Yeah. Then as your perception of that gap growing bigger and bigger, the normal response is to try to expand the self, so that it becomes a bigger guy to control. But the irony is, like, when that becomes bigger, the gap opens up even bigger. Then drinking salt water, drinking seawater to quench thirst.
I would like to just say something about this whole series, as well as everything else that's been going on during this pandemic. I am not an official spokesman for Urban Dharma by any means, but I would like to remind everybody that we are still an entity, even though we're not in the space, we're not in that sacred space.
Wait, you are an official spokesperson for Urban Dharma. Excuse me, you're on the board. Okay, continue speaking.
Sorry.
I got to make sure that the people who are with the job is doing the job. I'm trying to do my job. No, you are doing your job. Please continue.
Okay. But I was going to say, we're not in that sacred space, but we are very much in a sacred space. And I think Urban Dharma is really doing fine. And it's because people have been very generous in their support. And the sustaining members keep us alive and keep the doors, in this case, shut, but they're our doors. And we haven't had to give them up. But I think you've said it a couple of times, but I think it really bears repeating that this is a very special time for all of us. We're so fortunate to be able to have so many teachers. I mean, you have taught more during this time than I think you've taught previously ever. I mean, it's 3 days, 5 days, 6 days, 7 days a week. And we've never been able to have that kind of concentrated experience. And it's just been wonderful for us. And in the middle of all of this, we can be very grateful. And if you all would like to support Urban Dharma with its doors shut, it is still possible to do that. If you go on our website, udharmanc.com, there's a giving tab, and it's easy to do that. And Fabiola has been very generous with her time with posting
Yes.
these things. And in addition, she has posted a way for us to give Donna to Han Lai. I mean, it's just, I can hardly have the words to tell you how much I appreciate what you have been doing. And I think everybody does. You may not expect applause, but you're getting a lot of it. So, but I just want to thank everybody for the participation. I mean, it's just been wonderful to get to know people in a different way. But I feel like I know a lot of you just because you're asking questions and making comments, and it's just been wonderful. So thank you very, very much.
Thank you, everyone.
It's if possible in October, assuming things don't get a whole lot worse, there will possibly be an outdoor program, a weekend program at one of the members' homes who has a huge backyard. So that information will be forthcoming, and we hope that can occur.
Right.
But,
so stay tuned.
It's all uncertain.
Yeah, it's all uncertain, yes.
We'll see, but thank you again.
Dr. Lai, I also was thinking this week, there was something I wanted to say to you too, and gratitude and thank you. You may or may not remember, but at the beginning of this series, I remember that I had I said that one of the reasons I was taking this course was, I remember I used the word to the effect of I felt like a fraud, and I do my daily practice and we do the 4 immeasurables, and I always felt this angst within myself as I was saying the words, because I felt like there was some kind of a block. And I want you to know that, and I've noticed this, that especially the past few weeks, I've noticed that shifting to where in the past week or two, I feel like it's really been dissolving. And I really feel when I say those words that I really wholeheartedly feel it and mean it. And
oh, good.
Wonderful transformation. And it just happened. It wasn't like I was trying to force it or push it. It developed. And I believe that the meditations that you do are really pretty powerful. And I think that they played a big part. I was wondering today when I was listening to it, I almost feel like you're transmitting to us, and I'm wondering if you have that intention, or because you're giving us a lot of guidance and direction. And I don't know if we're in, like, I hear about these alpha waves and theta waves, but we're definitely in a different state at that point to receive what you're I feel transmitting during the meditation. But I'm wondering if that played a part. I don't know, but in any case, I just, as I'm sure all of you, everyone here, want to give you my thanks and gratitude and appreciation.
Yeah, it's interdependence, like the teacher, Kyoba Jigten founder Runka Gyohe says, as the student develops, the teacher grows. So it's interdependence,
It's so true.
Yeah. Anyone else? Not about me, but about the teachings. Jim? Maybe you have been muted.
now. I have to turn on my mic.
Ah, yes.
That helps. Thank you so much. And thank you, Urban Dharma people, for supporting this. I found this really helpful. I'm a therapist, and I've just found it easier. Maybe the last month, I've noticed that I hear a lot of people talking about their suffering, and I'm somehow finding I take it in a different way. And and it's easier, I feel, to see the part of them that isn't suffering and to relate to that part. And I know that's due to practicing this.
Yes.
And I'm grateful for that kind of shift.
Yeah, these Lojong teachings are really amazing. The words are so deceptively simple. But go back again and again, chew on it, As I mentioned, Dalai Lama, one time he said, we have a saying in Tibetan, when you're giving teachings or commentary on texts, you should do it like an old man eating. So I said, oh, what does that mean? He said, so an old man, with no more teeth left, and it says when he gets a piece of, meat in his tupa, like this soup that Tibetans eat, this kind of soup with wheat noodles. He says, and when you get a piece of meat that is soft, then you chew on it, and get all the flavors that you can get out of it. Don't waste it, But then sometimes you get a piece that is really tough, And then he says, then just swallow and move on. So with the Lojong, the words here, some words, sometimes it feels like, like a very tender piece of tofu, chew on it, get all the flavors that you can get out of it, And sometimes it just feels like, like a rock, just swallow it and then move on, But the point is, it changes also. Some of the words, sometimes it will be that very flavorful, and other times it will be, like a rock, But come back again and again to these Lojong teachings and chew on it, The fifth point I want to remind everyone is the point on the measure of having trained the mind. Meaning, you want to know how well your practice is going, just check with these 4 lines. No need to call the teacher, no need to ask, this person, that person, just see, Are you starting to see that all Dharma practice, all teachings, they converge on a single point? And the single point is practicing the 2 Bodhicitta. Is your spiritual practice, is your Dharma practice. No matter what Dharma practice you do, leading you to the single point, if that's happening, your Lojong practice is going well. You want to know if it is going well or not? Of the 2 witnesses, you are now valuing your own conscience. The principal one is your own conscience. Rather than asking other people, what do you think? How well am I doing? Rather than comparing with other people, you look at your own mind. You're trusting that more and more. Then you know it's going well. Third one, no matter what is happening, you find that you have, a settled mind. It's not like you're not seeing, like, for example, like right now, It's very, very uncertain, very chaotic, a lot of suffering arising. You see that, but you still have a very settled mind. Then you know, Lojong is working, And finally, even if you are distracted, which we say, like the main training, come back again to your breath, to your breath, to your breath. Don't be distracted. But if you begin to see how even when you're distracted, you don't lose the two bodhicittas. Then you know, yes, this is going well. So these are the 4 tests. If you need a test, this is the litmus test for whether Lojong is going in the right direction or not. So that 5th point, very useful. So it's 9:40 now. One last pith instruction from Atisha. Atisha says, a very simple one. He says, when among other people, watch your mouth. When alone, watch your heart. That's really, really important. So among other people includes when on social media, watch your words. When alone, watch your heart. Yeah. So that's a good one to take to heart in a very brief. Yeah. And a couple of quick announcements for those of you with that particular interest in. There is a Medicine Buddha retreat coming up, a virtual retreat. You check the Urban Dharma Facebook for information on how to register. It's coming soon, or on my Facebook page for that. It will be starting from the evening of the 14th to around noon on the 16th of August. It's primarily a mantra accumulation retreat. So there's not going to be teachings like this. But the weekend before that, I'm going to give maybe a 2-hour teaching on the particular practice text. And this event is, I'm organizing it for one of our Rinpoches. And so his students in Vietnam, Singapore, Malaysia, they're going to join in. So effectively, we're going to keep this as a around-the-clock practice in this dedicated Zoom room. Yeah. So if you're interested, please pay attention to that. So that's one thing. Second thing is the very first weekend of September. I am going to be doing a virtual retreat through the Ecumenical Buddhist Society of Little Rock in Arkansas. So you check their Facebook page. I don't know when they're going to publicize this, but it's a retreat called In Samsara, It is the Body That Wanders, a virtual retreat on mindfulness of the body. That will start on the evening of September 4th and continuing till midday on September 6th, Sunday. So here briefly, it says, Dr. Lai will offer a retreat on various Buddhist practices centered on the body. While we often recognize that the Buddha considered the mind to be the main focus of spiritual training, the important role of the body is sometimes overlooked or even misunderstood. In this, ironically, virtual retreat, Dr. Lai will emphasize the benefits and power of an approach to Buddhist meditative practice that places embodiment at the center. Practices covered in this retreat include mindfulness of breath practice as a body-centered practice, movement and embodiment practice, and body as mandala practice. Retreat will consist of both practice and teaching sessions. And so this will be offered on Zoom. And so there is registration information that will be forthcoming from the Ecumenical Buddhist Society of Little Rock. And whenever that is publicized, then I will share on my Facebook page as well. Then Southern Dharma Retreat Center in September, the third weekend, I believe. I'm doing a love and compassion via the 6-syllable mantra. Another retreat. That retreat is actually for 4 days. That's Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. That registration is already open, and so you can look on Southern Dharma Retreat Center as well. I believe the Southern Dharma Retreat and the Little Rock Retreat, there is a limitation of 30 people registering for the Zoom. And those two are not going to be streamed to Facebook. They're going to be only on Zoom. So be on the lookout for that. Then at the very end, the dedication prayer, which says, the excellent and supreme Bodhicitta, where it has not arisen, may it arise. Where it has arisen, may it not decrease, but increase higher and higher. Chanchu semchu rinpoche ma ge pa nam ge gyurche ge pa nyam pa me pa yang gong ne gong du the worship. Good night, everyone. So this Thursday night, we'll take a break for a few weeks. Good time for you to practice Lojong during this time, the main practice. And then some other series will start for the Thursday night. So stay tuned. Ta-ta.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.